You're listening to Forge Theater Labs,
a podcast devoted to exploring theater history. Where does that idea come from?
concepts in storytelling.
Is anything that original?
Isn't that just an assumption?
And the creation of theater from behind the scenes.
How do they even do that?
This is Forge Theater Labs.
History, innovation, perspective.
Welcome to Forge Theater Labs. I'm Josh Hsu, and tonight I'm thrilled to welcome Bramble Theater Company. Bramble Theater Company is one of the newest additions to Maine's vibrant theater arts scene. It's built on years of rich experience in dramaturgy, scholarship, and innovative theatrical experimentation. Today, I have the pleasure of chatting with its co-founders, Todd Bacchus and Dr. Beka Bryer. Welcome, Todd. Welcome, Beka.
Thanks for having us.
Hello, hello.
So just so you know who Todd is a new works director, dramaturg, and illustrator based in Portland, Maine, where he is the associate artistic director of Portland Stage and the artistic director of the newly minted Bramble Theater Company. He likes to work on weird theater, by which he means sci-fi plays about absentee voting, Chekhovian cavemen plays, time-traveling gentrification musicals about kids, and plays that combine poetry, swordplay, and ghosts. His work focuses on showcasing stories that stretch the theatrical imagination. Todd was a co-producer of Dungeons and Drama Nerds, a weekly podcast that explored the intersection of theater and tabletop role-playing games for 3 seasons. A co-founder and artistic producer with Power Out, and a co-founder and former producer of Hot Pepper Theater. Todd, since you've described your work as weird theater, I thought I'd start off with this question first. What's the weirdest theatrical idea you've encountered that somehow worked beautifully?
Yeah, in works that I've done, one of the weirdest plays that I've ever tried to stage was Ben Ferber's.
Let's Play Play?
No, not Let's Play Play.
For the Lulz?
For the Lulz. His For the Lulz, which was like a very online hacker and hacktivist driven play where 90% of the scenes took place on the internet. Like one scene and only one scene took place in real life, and everything else was like blog posts, tweets, RSS feeds, records, all sorts of weird stuff. And the challenge I had was like, how do you stage a fight, or in this case more of a pissing match, on the internet in a way that like makes sense to the audience that these people are communicating with each other, and makes sense to the audience that they are not in physical space with one another, which our whole thing is being in physical space with one another in the theater. But for one of those fights in particular, we had this visual motif of like sharks circling each other, that I think worked really well, but wound up being like a very lo-fi way to stage the internet.
Absolutely. And so now you have to stage it all the time with X, right? Like every sort of interesting exchange, I think that would be a fascinating way to sort of lean into that.
Mm-hmm.
So introducing you, Beka, Dr. Beka Bryer is a performance historian, administrator, dramaturg, stage manager, and producer living in Portland, Maine. She earned her PhD in theater and drama from Northwestern University and currently teaches at the Maine College of Art and Design. She's also the current managing director of Bramble. And so welcome, Beka. I thought I'd sort of pivot to you as both a historian and producer. What's one overlooked moment in theater history that deserves far more attention?
Yeah, I sat with this for a little bit. So my background is in 19th century American theater. I researched the 18th century to the present day, but 19th century is my jam. And when I saw this question, my first thought was the Shakespeare riots, which are also called the Astor Place riots, which are in 1849 in New York City, and is prior to the Civil War, one of the biggest civilian casualty events. And it was ostensibly a fight between a British actor, Charles Macready, and an American actor, Edwin Forrest, over who could perform Shakespeare better. But it's actually about nativism and immigration, and then it exploded into the streets of New York City. And some of those things we're still seeing to this day about who can control art and who gets to say who gets to make what art.
I love this idea that, Todd, you're very much into sort of pop culture, leaning into that. At the same time, Beka, I think you're also sort of this deep resource for theater history. And I think that sort of resonates with Forge and me in particular, just because I love both those things. And so what has been sort of something joyful about working with each other, given your sort of vast differences there and passions?
Yeah, sir.
Yeah. So I think one of the things is we've worked together as like director and dramaturg or playwright and dramaturg on a couple different projects before, but this is our first time producing together in this fashion. And part of what's been fun about it is both like finding how we work best together, but also tapping a bunch of our like wonderful friends to bring into this process with us. I had been doing some producing work in New York about a decade ago with two really close friends where we did a bunch of work like in rapid succession, very fast. And then I got here and Beka was elsewhere at the time. You were in Boston at the time and then
Chicago. Yeah.
Oh, I thought you were in Boston for just like a smidge before.
I was in Boston 2015 to 2017, and then
Yeah. When I came back in 2016.
We're doing great.
Yeah. That's our timeline. But as a result, when I moved back here, I felt kind of like adrift in terms of having artistic co-producers here. And so I did some readings, I did some other stuff. But once Beka came back here in 2020,
Yes.
We started noodling on like other ways that we could work together. And so yeah, this has been like fun and fruitful. We did a bunch of readings, and now we're diving into a production.
Yeah.
Yeah, absolutely. So this summer, listeners, for those who are interested, they're launching their inaugural production, Heart of Duckness by A.J. Diddy. For those of you who don't know this play takes a unique twist on the historical 1884 Berlin Conference, presenting it through the lens of ducks instead of delegates. I like to think it's a really unsettling, funny piece that also carries some historical weight, which kind of is the perfect introduction to you both. Also, listeners, if you're interested, they're also on our episode of Playdates as guests, and so feel free to check that episode out if you want to learn more about them. But for our conversation tonight, I'm really interested in diving into that process of building a new theater company, discussing why absurdism, particularly in the lens of Heart of Duckness, feels so relevant today, and uncovering the sort of weird stories that are still waiting to be told. And so I'm going to start off with this. Before we talk about the play itself, right? At what point did founding your own company become something you needed to do?
Yeah. I know for me, I've been very fortunate in my position at Portland Stage to kind of have like a lab feels too strong, but a little playground where I could test ideas with. So when I first got back, I did a bunch of workshops of plays, some by friends, some by people who were new to me. And then I started doing the series,
Too Strange to
Too Strange to Live, Too Weird to Die. My very, very longly titled series that my friend who worked in the box office hated me for. But it was a collection of plays that I knew I couldn't get done on the main stage at Portland Stage. And the first pass at those happened right before COVID. And the second pass happened right after COVID. And I think the precarity of COVID with these one night only readings really made me consider like, why am I putting all of this effort into something that we're going to do for one night and then be done with? And so my wheels started turning towards like, okay, what would producing in Portland, Maine look like as an independent producer? And now that I had Beka back here, figuring out how we do that together.
Yeah, because for me, I have a background in stage management, and also I have worked in box offices for a very long time, including in the box office at Portland Stage, where my coworker hated the title of Too Strange to Live, Too Weird to Die, and also hated that Todd chose to do A Beautiful Day in November on the banks of the Great Lakes.
A very long play.
A very long title play. Got really annoyed about that. Understandably so. In my opinion, Todd disagrees. And for those who have never had the pleasure / misfortune of writing dissertation or going to graduate school, it's a really lonely process and you're really sort of just in your head. And so I came back to Maine because I had the ability to work on my dissertation not in Chicago. And I was like, I miss doing literally anything that isn't reading documents or being in the archive. Like, I love those things, but I'm losing my mind a little. And I missed making theater. I hadn't done it, at that point, in 5 or 6 years. And Todd and I have, bounced doing things together. I've worked with him as a dramaturg for a very long time. And last summer, I was finally like, well, I feel stable enough in where I am in my job that, like, I think we could do something. And similarly, because I have worked in academia and I've worked in theater, like, there's certain limitations on what you can do and what people will say yes to. But if we are the ones producing, then we can make the theater that we want to make, which is not always what the theater that is appealing beyond just the quote unquote traditional conventional theater. We can make a play about ducks.
Yeah, I think, I have struggled because, I was sort of raised on the sort of like in your face controversial plays like Mark Ravenhill. Like, I really love in your face plays, but I recognize that those plays perhaps cannot exist, right, at your traditional regional theater. And so, I appreciate that there needs to be a space to play, a space to experiment, a space to be weird. And I think also Forge Theater Labs shares that mission itself. So let's talk a little bit about Heart of Duckness. Every inaugural production functions a little bit like a mission statement, I would say. So why was, in your opinion, Heart of Duckness the right first conversation outside of stage readings to have with audiences?
Yeah. So when Todd and I first kicked around the idea that we were going to start a theater company, we got together a bunch of people that we knew who were interested in reading plays, but also that had tastes that were not just like Todd and I have similar, like parallel tastes. Like, we have things that we both really like and things that I love that he hates and he loves that I hate. But we got a group of them together and we read a bunch of plays that we thought were interesting and could possibly be a good first production. And Heart of Darkness was actually the first play that we read. And it had a wide range of reactions. There were people who were like, this is incredibly funny and I want to see it right now. And there were people who were like, I am repelled by these ducks.
Which I think is correct.
Yeah, you should be, right? To a certain extent. Anyway, without giving anything away.
Well, I'm not giving too much away. But what it does as a play is speak to sort of both of our sensibilities and what we find interesting in the American theater that isn't often produced on, your LORT stages, your SPT stages, which is, it has the historical bent, which is always my jam. I love looking into the past to talk about the present. It has absurdism and satire, which is a little bit more Todd's bag. And it takes itself the right amount of serious because it recognizes that you are in fact watching a play on the stage.
Yeah, I want to follow up with you, Todd, because, obviously absurdism is your bent. The play transforms the Berlin Conference into a room of ducks. On paper, that sounds really ridiculous, and yet it becomes really devastating in that read. Like, what does absurdity allow audiences to understand that realism might obscure?
Yeah. I mean, I think this is part of a larger trend in theater in general, where a lot of the comedies that you're seeing being written today, especially by Americans, are like funny until they're not. And so they use humor to disarm their audiences and get them into like a nice kind of relaxed place. And then they say, hey, we're going to talk about some other really hard things too right now. Is that cool? And because you've like bought in to all of the other things that are happening, I think people respond more to that. For me, with this play and like with absurdism as well, I was not aware of the Berlin Conference of 1884 and 1885 when I read this play. My buddy,
I sure was.
my buddy AJ Diddy sent me this my way at Portland Stage in like my professional capacity, and I read it and I was like, this is fascinating. And then I started Googling stuff and I was like, wait, all of this happened, but they weren't ducks. And so I sent it to Beka immediately and I was like, I think you're going to really like this play. Like, it's funny, it's weird, it's got a lot of history that I didn't know that you did. But it really, I think that there's a lot of people who are going to come into this show who are in the same position I was, where this is just like not a historical moment that we're taught about. And I think the play's use of humor will bring in people who wouldn't come to a play that's just like, we're going to talk about colonialism in Africa and Europe in the 1880s. Um, and the both the outlet, like we're going to have some kind of outlandish outfits. We're making duck bills for people to make them feel more avian, instead of, human and mammalian. But I think people are going to see some of that in the imagery and hear that like it's a play about ducks, and they're going to come see this play that wouldn't have normally signed up for like, let's talk about colonialism for 2 hours.
Absolutely. I think there's something about sort of like being able to release that lever of seriousness so that
Mhm.
you can just absorb what's actually happening. I think that's sort of right. I think the beauty of humor within theater, and like that's just a type of humor that we can definitely leverage. And I think there is a historical precedence for this. Like we've seen shows like Hamilton, right? That obviously lends itself to history, pulls it, and then in some ways, right, sometimes overtakes the history. And so
Mhm.
that has been a sort of concern for me because, like, obviously watching
Mhm.
Hamilton, and I actually was in New York this past weekend, and I ran into someone who was holding a Hamilton pamphlet. And I said, well, what did you think of Hamilton? Was it your first show? And they said, it was my first show, but I'm a historian. And I was like, oh no,
Mhm.
okay, so I understand your disappointment with certain characterizations at certain points. And he said, yeah, I just feel like that conversation was a little bit more nuanced. And so for Beka, turning to you as a theater historian and a dramaturg and a
Mhm.
historian in general, like what conversations did you have with the script's relationship to actual history? And what are those
Yes.
differences for us? Yeah.
Yeah. So again, not to spoil anything about the play, but like to spoil some things about the play. For those who don't know, the 1884 Berlin Conference is one of the hallmarks of what was called the Scramble for Africa. So, the European powers had decimated the Americas. They had taken over much of Asia, and Africa was still sort of untapped, except along the coast where slavery had occurred. Um, and what AJ does in the play, which is really lovely, is bring the brutal conditions of what happened to African people, particularly in the Congo, to the fore. The historical twist, however, is that in 1884, those things had actually not happened yet.
Mm.
They happen later once King Leopold of Belgium gets the holdings, is when the truly brutal, horrific conditions occur. So when we've been in rehearsal, when I'm talking to actors about what's going on, I will be like, in the real world, this hasn't happened yet. But for you, in this world of ducks, this has happened already. You know what these things are. Um, and we need to understand that on like the emotional level that something terrible is happening in Africa, but no one's really naming it as such because to the European powers, nothing terrible is really happening in Africa.
Hmm.
Right. Yeah. It's like, I think part of what's been interesting is while AJ futzes with the timeline a little, the end goals of what he said, or like the end happenings of what he talks about all do happen. He just lays them out in a slightly more dramatic fashion, but like, all of this happened, none of it is true, like that
Yeah.
kind of a mindset that like, I think at the end of the play, if you walk away from seeing the show, yes. Is the timeline a little futzed with? Totally. Did all of these things still happen? Absolutely. And I think that's the like gravity of the play that really hits people at the end.
Absolutely. And I think to a certain extent, when we're talking about storytelling, like this idea that we need to be historically accurate isn't true, right? And I like to sort of say this to akin to the history we learn in high school. And then at a
Mhm.
certain point, hopefully, we encounter history that then makes us revisit and live that asynchronously. Like we now have to restructure that conversation accordingly. And I think theater does so in a very compressed format, right?
Yeah.
Like we're like, this is history. this is a sort of reconstruction of that history, and here's a new perspective on it. And I think sometimes it allows audiences to have a much more fruitful conversation and become more receptive. And so just because they're experiencing it indirectly, they may have some context, but they may not have the whole story.
Well, and it's the thing I think about with Hamilton, because I remember when Hamilton came out, this tells you how long Todd and I have known each other, is that I told him to go see it at the Public.
Mm-hmm.
And he went and saw it at the Public, and he was like, you will have to come see this. This is for you. This is like a show that it's like your jam completely. And then, you know, Hamilton truly like swept the nation and the world. And my first glance at it was like, oh, this is lovely. And then I read commentary from a historian named Lyra Montero, who was like, there's something that feels off about this, particularly with Thomas Jefferson and Sally Hemings. Like, they're not dealing with slavery in a way that is like Lin-Manuel Miranda is like not whitewashing it, but like not actually facing it head on in a way that is telling the truth about the history. And then my brain, which is both performance minded and history minded, was like, yeah, and this is true of so many. Like, anytime you see history on stage, you're getting a particular perspective. You can't tell everything about it. And the hope, for me at least, with this show is that it spurs people on to thinking and reading more about what happens in the Congo, what happened in Africa, and actually how that is still trickling down to what is occurring there today.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, absolutely. I think Lin-Manuel Miranda even references that. He acknowledges it and like, you know, like that it is a inspiration to study history in certain ways. And it's an inspiration to deep dive. Like, I'm thinking of Operation Mincemeat, which is all the rage on Broadway right now, is like, I didn't know about that, but great. Now I have this impetus to go watch the movie, I didn't even know it was a movie. And then I didn't even know before that there was like, that was a historical moment. And now I'm like, oh, now I'm engaged. And now it's accessible to me in a certain way.
Well, I mean, like, I think that there's definitely people who saw Hamilton and are like, this is not what the history was. And I think there's also people who saw Hamilton and were like, do I want to read the Federalist Papers? Like, is that a thing I want to do? And does that make me like a citizen?
I'm shaking my head. I'm like, don't read them.
I'm such a nerd that I actually went back and read them. Like, after I listened to Hamilton for the first time, I was like, I have to go back and read this.
Right. And I think it allowed people to access, particularly like Lynn is a little older than me. I think he's closer to Gen X.
Yeah, he's like he's in his 40s.
I think he's closer to Gen X, but like as a millennial, as someone who has seen patriotism being deployed in ways that are like, I think, ugly and gross and bad, there was something about Hamilton that was like, oh, there's like a positive view of this country that I have not felt for a long time that like can be accessed in the founding and today in a way that I think is powerful and useful. Like, I don't think I would have felt without Hamilton, which feels, I don't know. I'm not a huge Hamilton stan either, but like, I think it allowed people to like love their country in a way that they hadn't in a while.
Or I think about a play like The Normal Heart by Larry Kramer. Like one of my first going to New York experiences was going to go seeing The Normal Heart in like 2011. There's a longer story behind that we will not talk about on camera. But what I found like when the play is just raw and unflinching and like hits you over the head and the heart and like people were sobbing uncontrollably, and then you walked out of the theater and Larry Kramer in the current day had written a thing to be handed out to be like, please know that all these things are still happening. Like, AIDS funding still getting cut. People are still dying. Like, he as the playwright was still like self-referentially commenting on his production. And I found that so fascinating because it wasn't sanctioned by the producers, but he had like stationed people outside for every performance and done it.
Fascinating.
Well, that's who Larry Kramer was as a person. He was very anti-everything.
But I think that speaks to sort of like when art is just for entertainment and when art can actually affect change, there are two different pathways to it, which is like a direct call to the audience. Whereas, Lynn's sort of philosophy was sort of inspiring people, right,
Yeah.
to sort of be there. And I think as a person of color, watching Hamilton for me was a moment where I was like, I get to be part of this history too.
Yes.
And that was a discussion of like recognizing that Hamilton, who I knew little about, was also an immigrant. And that would, well, I'm not an immigrant, my parents were. I think that is such a fascinating part of that conversation and what it opened up to us. And so I think of theater as sometimes an opportunity for conversation. And that conversation can lead to action, but it doesn't necessitate it. I think this is a great place to take a break. We'll be right back. I want to talk a little bit more about absurdism. I want to talk more about Heart of Darkness. We're talking to Todd, Brian Bacchus, and Beka Bryer. We'll be right back.
At Forge Theater Labs, we're building bold, imaginative theater, supporting new artists, new stories, and new ways of experiencing performance. We're proud to share that Forge Theater Labs is now a sponsored project of Fractured Atlas, which means your donations are tax-deductible and directly support the creation of this podcast, live tapings, and artist-driven projects. If our work has inspired you, made you think, or brought you closer to the theater community, we invite you to help keep it going. You can make a donation by visiting forgetheaterlabs.com for our link to our Fractured Atlas page. Every contribution, big or small, helps us forge new pathways for artists and audiences alike. Thank you for being part of our community.
Welcome back to Forge Theater Labs. I'm Josh N Hsu, your host, and today we were just speaking with Todd, Brian Bacchus, and Dr. Beka Bryer from Fox Bramble about their upcoming inaugural production of A.J. Diddy's Heart of Darkness. And for those of you who don't know, Heart of Darkness is an absurdist play about the 1884 Berlin Conference, but instead of delegates, we get ducks. And so I thought in this segment, we would pivot to talk about why absurdism keeps on returning as an art form. And I thought we might sort of take a look at, right, why it keeps on returning as a story form. We see the reawakening of classics like Waiting for Godot alongside innovative new works such as A.J. Diddy's Heart of Darkness and Ethan Lipton's Seat of Our Pants, which is a playful yet deepful philosophical reinterpretation of Thornton Wilder's The Skin of Our Teeth. All these plays sort of explore surrealism, allegory, and theatrical exploration. And so I thought I'd kick it off with a sort of pivot back to Albert Camus and the myth of Sisyphus, Beka. And so, which beautifully addresses one of humanity's most profound dilemmas, which is the quest for meaning in a universe that offers few definitive answers. And so, how does that sort of tie into your understanding of absurdism? Like, how does Camus' philosophy tie in there for you?
Yeah, I mean, the thing about Camus is like one of many French philosophers that I had to touch when going to grad school. Is what I find so fascinating is this question of like, we keep searching meaning when we know we won't get answers, but we still like have to. The only way out is through, essentially. And another like human impulse is telling stories to each other, and like that's what the theater is that we're telling stories about ourselves to ourselves. And absurdism is lovely in that it really is highlighting the absurdities of life and just like amping it up and up. In preparing for this conversation, Todd and I were chatting, and I think I like somewhat flippantly said, I was like, absurdism's been around forever, and like it's just different with like each successive century. Because people keep coming back to like farce and like laughing at yourself in order to deal with like the realities that you're living with, because every person ever has lived through like some type of calamity. You're always living in interesting times. And so you think I was like trying to think like, well, like Moliere's writing Tartuffe, which is like its own type of satire and absurdism, because he's directly commenting on the fact that like he's dealing with rich French nobles who will like believe anything someone that they think has power says. And he's like trying to deal with that. And he deals with that in the only way that you can in France, which is like a very strict way of doing the Comédie Française, but like, and making it just absurd enough to get it through censors. And I think there's something lovely about really pointing out the absurdism of life, which like you get in Godot, you get in The Skin of Our Teeth and The Seat of Our Pants, and like you get in Heart of Deafness. A.J. Diddy is really interested in being like, what does being a duck change about this story, and what does it not change at all? And I think that that's compelling in today's world, like just like it was 100 years ago, 200 years ago, 300 years ago, and so on.
Yes, I think it's true. Like, I think back on, Aristophanes, right? That idea of like
Mhm.
how we cope with war, right? Is that sort of at the center of it. And of course, there are giant phalluses. It's an absurdist piece to begin with. And so, like, I think Todd, I want to sort of tap into you about like, your thoughts on this. Like why is it that absurdism is such a sort of comforting place for us? Like, is it the aspect of like being able to practice our own uncertainty with our lives? Is it a place for us to cope with those mechanisms, in your opinion?
Yeah. I mean, I think successful absurdism is we take something in the real world and we amp it up to 11 to show how full of folly and how crazy our lives are. I also think about like I have a friend, Romana Isabella, who lives in Kiev, and is a theater artist and has been doing some incredibly powerful work, but is also like doing that work while bombs are dropping on the city she lives in, and that like they are having to hold both like the realities of war and the need to create at the same time. And yeah, like I think absurdism allows us to like point out that we don't need to live like this. I think that's a strong thing absurdism tries to tell us is that like this is crazy and we don't need to do it, but we're choosing to do it anyway. Whether that's our systems of governance, whether that's who the wealthy are listening to, whether that's carving up Africa. Like I think it allows us to really take a step back and say like this is so crazy, but it doesn't have to be. In a way that I think can be fruitful. I also think the uncertainties of our times have led to like, on TikTok, the kids are like reinventing Dada. And I don't think they're reading up on Dada. I think they're just doing it. I think they're just going into like weird, very weird cinematic choices because life feels so crazy. And I think that there is a comfort in seeing that like you're not alone in thinking that the world's on fire and that the world's crazy. Um, and seeing those things reflected in the theater, I think allows us to all find a little peace.
I think it's so interesting that like, we keep on talking about this cycle, but I think every generation has its own cultural anxieties, right? Like millennials, you had, I'm sorry, I'm not a millennial. I'm like cuspish, like on the 2 days before being a millennial. So I am Gen X, but I feel really torn. I understand reality bites, but I definitely don't connect with any other characters. Right. So
Yeah, no.
I'm cuspish. So I think like, what are the sort of cultural anxieties of like the absurdist plays that we're seeing today? Like in your opinion, like what are some of the perhaps things that we're perhaps tapping into, you know, because we had a different sort of right cycle not only 15 years ago.
Yeah, I mean capitalism.
Yeah, I mean, I think it's I so this is a slight tangent, but I was telling someone about this play that we are producing about the Heart of Darkness, and they took a beat and they're like, "Oh, so it's like Rhinoceros." And I was like, "Well, yes and no. Like, yes, same vibes. No, they're not turning into rhinoceroses. They are already ducks." But I think I think it is capitalism. I think it's fascism. Like the rise of fascism really, it's why the Dadaists and the futurists were existing is because they were also, I mean, the futurists were fascists, but like,
yeah,
that's
still
also,
are.
but still are, but also that is a thing. Like I don't spend a ton of time looking at right-wing art because I have other things to do, but like they also have their own version of like satire and absurdism that like filters down through, because again, when you heighten something to 11, it points it out even further. So I'm like trying to think. Currently, the people have really latched on to that poor raccoon in Seattle, Jimothy. And like, Jimothy is everywhere. And like, that's just like a culture, like it's a meme, but it's also so absurd. Like, and it's tapping into something really particular. It's like something weird, something that we all can root for because it's an underdog. And it's also that like, we don't think of raccoons as like good animals in our lives. People don't like raccoons generally. Todd loves raccoons.
I love raccoons. I mean, it's the mascot for Port Fringe. So
Yeah,
that is true.
Shout out to Floam.
We love Floam. And like, I think a lot about that video of the raccoon trying to dip the cotton candy in water to clean it to eat it, and then it disappears. And then like, I get emotionally devastated. So, but all this to say that like the way that culture circulates now, it's like absurdism can spread like wildfire essentially in a way that, you know, back in the 20s and 30s, it was less automatic.
You had to write a play that you only read in your salon with like 15 other people.
Exactly. And I think our attention span, like absurdism is something that you can latch onto and that you can repeat, you can recycle, right? Like there's something that, you know, I think about that awful frog meme. I forget what it was called. The Pepe frog from about a few years ago. Yeah, that was all the rage, and somehow it had latched on in our society. So like, how would you then leverage that, like in a culture like that is so obsessed with, you know, absurdism and then can take it the wrong way? Like, how do you leverage that to sort of balance meaning with, you know, appeal, so to speak?
Yeah. I think, like, as I was saying before, with how AJ uses his comedy in this instance to like disarm, and how this play is like very funny until it's not. I think what's important in the story that he's trying to tell, and in how absurdism can be used, is really feeling the gravity of the real world stakes and letting those set in over the course of the play. I think if we started there, I don't think that people would get us on board, as I was saying earlier. But like, I think you see this in what's the Albee play? Seaside?
Seafair? No. Seascape?
Seascape.
Got there.
Seascape. Do you know Seascape, Josh?
I do not. So tell us a little bit about it.
It's incredible. It's bizarre. It is this like very very well-to-do white couple, usually, sits down on the beach for a lovely like picnic and beach day, and then two sea monsters walk out of the ocean, and they're trying to do the same thing. And at the beginning, both couples are like leery of the other because they're so different and they're so weird, and then they kind of like find common ground with each other and start to be like pretty chill with each other. And then what I feel can only be a metaphor for racism, like they both something that seems innocuous to one couple is like said by the other, and really like deep-seated feelings come out on both sides that reach a fever pitch, and I think it allows us to look at a big topic and like a serious topic, like you know, both keeping up with the Joneses, but also like racism, and allows us to do that in a both like comfortable but alien setting, and then allows us to talk about a story that I don't think people would do if it was like a white and a Latin couple meeting at the beach and like the same things are said, but I think allows people to think about what that might mean.
Yeah, absolutely. I think, you know, if it is too sort of on the nose, right? We tend to go, oh, well, I'm not part of that. Right. Like I'm not that person. Right. But with that distance, it allows you to go, okay. Right. And I think as theater makers, we can leverage, oh, you are that person. Right. Like, like we can bring it closer, and we can also make it further apart and sort of engaging that. You were about to say, Beka.
I mean, I unfortunately, being the person, I was like, it's very Brechtian to like do this type of distancing. Like the stranger effect of Verstandung, the making the familiar strange. Like I've been thinking about that a lot in rehearsal because so much of what AJ's playing with is making something that seems like quite normal, like going for a swim, going to the bar, having a meeting, and then like they're ducks, and that the duck part of it makes it strange, but that you also recognize it. And like there's critiques of Brecht, to be sure, but like he had something for that. Like he was onto something with the idea that like if you take one step away, it allows you to recognize it.
And I think the thing that people forget about Brecht often, when we think about the alienation effect, is that Brecht was really invested in humor. Like he believed in humor. He didn't want to alienate people by like yelling at them for 3 hours about, making them think about their life. Like he wanted them to laugh and to discover that difference, right? And to sit with it and then to be able to think about the theater. I think that was a central thing. Like there are a lot of complaints about like his take on Beijing opera, which I completely agree with.
Yeah.
But at the same time, like I'm a Brecht nerd, like through and through. So like absolutely.
Yeah. Oh yeah, no. The Beijing opera thing, like clearly misunderstood what he was seeing.
Yeah, misunderstood what he was seeing, right? Misunderstood what that they were actually trying to do the opposite effect, which was to engage the audience, right? And to sustain them, because Beijing operas can last for a long time. And so I'm still convinced that I can pull it off one day. But yeah, to sort of be able to sit with that. Let me ask you something, because I want to pivot to sort of audiences. I went to see Seat of Our Pants at the Public by Ethan Lipton. And as I was walking out of the theater, I loved the production. I thought it was fantastic. It was wonderful, right up my alley. I heard an audience member, what did I just see? I don't think I understood anything. What do you do when someone sees an absurdist play like that or an absurdist experience? Like, how do we engage that conversation? How do we talk about it? And, I was able to overhear some of the conversation because I hung back a little bit, but there was someone trying to sort of walk them through what they thought the play was trying to do. And so like, what is that? Like, how do we respond to that?
Yeah. I mean, I think it's different with different plays and different like understandings of absurdism. I think that is a very classical, if you like, most people know when they're watching Godot, even if it's the first time they're seeing Godot, that he's not going to show up at the end. Spoiler alert. Sorry if that's new for you. But like most people know that going in. But I think to audiences who didn't know that, I think they often feel like they're being played with. And that like, to me, the point of that play is it's a play about waiting and wondering and like somewhat thinking about the death of God. Like what does it mean if the thing that you were holding on to for meaning doesn't exist? Is I think like what that play is grappling with. And that's kind of heady. That's kind of weighty. And I think that can go over a lot of people's heads. And I think, Beckett is doing a lot there. But I think that there's some people who feel like absurdism is like, I just want to be absurd for the sake of absurdity. And again, I think for it to work, for it to hit, for it to land, there has to be like a grain of truth in it. That we are, again, amping up and amping up and amping up until it feels almost unrecognizable. But that there is some truth there. And like, I am not the Thornton Wilder devotee in this pairing. But my understanding of the skin of our teeth is that we're watching a family deal with like very in some ways normal family circumstances, just from the dinosaur age until today and maybe even beyond. So he's like shifting scale, which Thornton Wilder loves playing with time scale. You see that in Pullman Train Hiawatha. You see that in Our Town a bit. He's like measuring, one life against millions of years. But that you're seeing this family in the skin of our teeth and the seat of our pants, dealing with like, in some ways, what can feel like quotidian, normal things, but on an insane scale.
Yeah.
Yeah. And I think all of the issues that are addressed in Skin of Our Teeth are still relevant today
Yeah.
to a certain extent, although through a lens of a different conversation, which I think, by the way, Seat of Our Pants, Ethan Lipton, if you're listening to this, does a fantastic job of pivoting away and giving us perspective from a modern perspective, right? There are moments where he steps out of the play and goes, this doesn't hold up. And I think that's really fantastic to be able to sort of have that commentary. Go ahead, Beka.
Well, of this artistic pairing, I am the Thornton Wilder devotee. I love Thornton Wilder. Todd directed Our Town earlier this year, and I think I was more excited about it than he was.
Good time.
Yeah, but I was like, heck yeah. And I think that most audiences are not gonna, for an absurdist play, are not gonna get it all. Like sometimes, like I will go, like I'm pretty well read. I have a PhD in theater. I'm well read. What am I talking about? And sometimes I will go see theater. And I'm like, I don't, like, what happened? What have I just watched? Because like even the most well read person can be like, I don't know what I just saw, but I got something from it, and it might take me a while. It might take me a lot of thinking and noodling on it to like figure out what it is. But like that's also the work of like, I think there is something to be said for a theater that's just engaging, that's just entertainment. But like the theater that I think both of us want to make is more about engaging people on a topic and like really digging our teeth in. And to bring it back to Beckett, like the thing that first pops into my head about like being like this audience member being like, I don't understand everything. As an artist, I'm like, okay, well, as Beckett would say, ever tried, ever failed, no matter, try again, fail better. Like your art's not always going to be for everyone, and that's okay. But the work is trying to tell the story as best as possible with the circumstances that you have. And so maybe that audience member didn't get it, but hopefully like was talking to their friend, or they get to think about it, or they go read The Skin of Our Teeth and they see what like the original thing was, or they read Wilder's Pulitzer Prize winning novel, The Bridge of San Luis Rey, which is excellent and deals with similar things of like, let's look at one moment in time in like these people's lives and how they get to this point on this bridge where it collapses under them. And like the world doesn't have meaning.
I think that's such a wonderful place to take a break. Quick quiz before we go. Everyone has to choose one. What feels most absurd today? And this is a multiple choice one. We're going to go with number 1, family holidays. Number 2, theater funding. Number 3, academia. Go for it.
Oh, those 3. I mean, I just got back from a family holiday. And there was some absurdism to it, but I think with big family holidays, it's the Disney World problem, where everyone knows that they're supposed to be having a good time. So everyone tries really hard to have a good time. And in trying to have a good time, they end up not having a great time. And then they get mad that they're not having a great time. And I think that's like quintessential. Whereas I try to be a roll with the punches kind of guy. I try to be a let's keep our expectations low and everything else will come up roses for us sort of guy.
Yeah.
Amazing. Beka, what about yourself?
I mean, I think it's a gimme that I would choose academia, mostly because there's so many absurd things that occur within that environment, like the bureaucracy of it, the jumping through hoops just to get like $100 to do something. Currently, it's trying to convince my students to not use AI to write their things. So I want them to have writing skills into the future. Like just this, like you're going to college. Why do I have to convince you to use your brain? Like this feels not great. It feels very silly.
Fantastic. We'll be right back. This is Forge Theater Labs. We're talking with Todd Brian Bacchus and Dr. Beka Bryer. We'll be right back. Want to get your brand in front of a passionate, creative, and engaged audience? Forge Theater Labs is looking for partners to sponsor this podcast and join us in bringing bold, innovative theater to life. If you'd like to place an ad right here, reach out to us at marketing@forgetheaterlabs.com. It's a simple, powerful way to support the arts while sharing your message with listeners who care about creativity and community. Again, that's marketing@forgetheaterlabs.com. Let's build something extraordinary together. Welcome back to Forge Theater Labs. And in our last segment, we were talking to Todd Bryan Bacchus and Dr. Beka Bryer about sort of the role of absurdism. I thought we'd pivot it back to a little bit more about the stories that they're excited to tell in the coming years. But of course, this fall, or this summer, I should say, they're launching Heart of Darkness. And so tell us a little bit about who's involved, like what's your cast look like, anything that you want to share about the production.
We have a really lovely cast. What I've mostly felt in this, like as we were getting started, this is our first production, and like a bunch of people whose work I really admire and respect, like signed on and were like, I'm in. So we have Holly Pryor, we have Nathan Speckman, we have Allison McCall, we have Gary Penn, we have Chris Say, we have Madison Shlama, we have Rylan Garnett, and we have Maya Williams. So just like some real, both like heavy hitters of Portland theater and like some newcomers. I think for Chris's first play up here.
Yeah.
And now is going to be, after this, is going to be in Are We Worthies and Phoenix Theater's Teus Andronicus. So we're like, yay, we brought someone new in. And then you have, Allison McCall, who's running Mad Horse, like just a wide range of people.
Yes, and absolutely. And for those of you who are listening, you can actually catch an interview about Mad Horse with Allison on the podcast. Maya is also spread throughout the season as a co-host. And so we're very excited for this production. I would say, obviously, Heart of Darkness is not the only project that you'll be doing. But if audiences were to come associate Fox Bramble with one artistic quality, not one genre, what do you hope that quality is?
I think for me, imaginative. Like my whole thing has been about stretching the theatrical imagination, and by that I mean like changing the idea of what we can put on stage and what we can see. And sometimes people hear that from me and they're like, you hate realism, which like, yeah, a little. But I think, I think that there's more stories that we can tell. And for me, my hope is that Fox Bramble will be invested in telling a wider range of stories, whether that's from different authors or about different topics. Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, I agree. I like imaginative, but I also really want from the heart sounds so trite. But like Todd and I are doing this on top of what feels like 10,000 other things in our lives. And we're doing it because we care deeply about the work and we think that this is a story that deserves to be seen by Portland audiences. And I think we both have we have a reputation around town of like people who care really deeply about the work that we do. And so like that's the thing that I'm like, we really care and we're really imaginative. Like those are the two things I'm like, if that's what people come away with from the production, I'll feel good.
I absolutely agree. And that is why I am such a big proponent of this play. Please go see it. For those who are wondering, what are the run dates? Like, how do they get tickets? Where do they go get them?
Yeah. So we're running August 20th to September 4th. September 4th is weird. It's a Friday, but it's a holiday weekend, and we wanted our cast to be able to celebrate the holiday. And also don't think that a lot of people want to be celebrating that holiday inside of the play. I think some people would, but not a huge margin. And you can go to we're doing a bunch of this in partnership with Portland Stage. So you can go to portlandstage.org. You can go to their events page and you can find all of our ticketing there. They're acting as a fiscal sponsor for us. This is part of the studio series at Portland Stage, which as a staff member, associated artists like myself can produce stuff in the studio in sort of a partnership program. Which
Yeah. And then we will have a pay what you can day on August 26th. So if like cost is a barrier, that is the day that you can go and see it for however much you'd like to pay.
Fantastic. Well, everybody run out and get your tickets. Make sure they sell out. Let's talk about sort of future, right? The future, looking forward. What are some shows that you have in mind? And let's start with this. Let's say I give you an unlimited budget, 3 productions, 1 season. What's that look like?
So we bounced around a lot of ideas when you gave us this prompt because we were like, no unlimited budget. Who has all this money? But like, it's great. And so we came up with 3 productions. The first would be The Absentee by Julia Doolittle, which is a play that Todd has bounced around wanting to do for many years.
Yeah, Julia Doolittle is a friend. We did a workshop of it before the pandemic. I got its first workshop production at No Theater in Cincinnati under Andrew Hungerford, but it's set in the far reaches of space on a space station in 2088. And after her space station gets like taken off commission, after a spaceship explodes in her sector, the operator starts getting calls because she's registered to vote in Florida, and there's an upcoming election, and they're asking if she'll vote absentee. And that also feels a little absurd. With which not all of the work that we're interested in is absurd, but I think it tells a really beautiful and like hopeful story. I think it uses sci-fi in really interesting ways. But one of the things that I have never figured out how to do that Andrew Hungerford kind of figured out how to do is there's a moment where operator has to turn off gravity. She's like trapped under space debris and she has to turn off the gravity in the space station. And I don't know how to turn off gravity in real life, but with an unlimited budget, I'm sure we could make some stuff fly.
Yeah,
and make it
absolutely,
work.
absolutely. Maybe you could stage it in space.
Ooh,
That would be really cool.
unlimited budget.
Yeah.
Like we just go up to the ISS and there we are, and we just do the whole show from there. Exactly.
Yeah.
Becca, do you have another show, or Todd, do you have another show?
Our second, we worked on it together. So second production is Matt Barbeau's The Beautiful Understick, La Linda Tierra que Busco Yo, which is a play that I really love. We saw it a couple years ago in New York. Matt's another, you'll work in the theater long enough, you learn to meet a bunch of playwrights. Matt's another playwright that Todd and I are both friends with. And it is based, this is why I think probably I'm pulled to it, though there's parts that are you more. It's based on a historical event, which is 2 Puerto Rican nationalists go and are making plans and are on a train to go do an assassination in 1959, and on their way
to kill Truman.
1949, 1959. It's fine. 59 is
1950.
50? Yeah, so it's Truman. In order to release some other Puerto Rican nationalists from jail. Like, it's like a political statement. And on the train ride from New York to D.C., they're interrupted by a whole bunch of people, including Maria from West Side Story.
Lin-Manuel Miranda as Hamilton.
And the playwright himself. And it questions identity, it questions history, and what does it mean to make a mark through a slightly sci-fi absurdist. We have a shtick, apparently. We saw this play in New York. We both really loved it. And I think we don't talk about Puerto Rico a lot today in the way that we probably should. And it comes up in the news, but then it sort of dissipates. And Matt's play really asks its audience to consider, what does Puerto Rican nationalism mean and look like in the world? To the point that when we saw a talk back for it, it got heated.
And I think, again, like with Heart of Darkness, I learned so many things during the course of that play that I did not know as someone who feels educated. But I learned a lot that, because we don't talk about Puerto Rico a lot in our history classes. I was not aware how recent, and I feel like acquisition is the right word, even though it feels gross. But like the U.S.'s acquisition of Puerto Rico is, that I had just assumed that had been how things had been for so long, that it must have happened much
sooner than 1898. And so it's a play that really has stuck in my brain ever since. Like, Matt had told us about it, and I was like, oh, that sounds great. And we made our trip down. I was like, this play is really good. I would like to see a production of it up in Maine.
Fantastic.
And then
Yeah.
Number 3, and this is one that's near and dear to my heart, I think. More, you love it, but
I love this play.
is Indecent by Paula Vogel. And this is truly like size is the problem here. I think this is very much a play that, like, if Portland Stage had all the money in the world, it might produce.
Yeah,
Mm-hmm.
we've considered it in the past at Portland Stage. It's just big, and it asks for a bunch of things. I think all of which are good things.
Mm-hmm.
But it asks for like a pretty big cast and also some people who can maybe play instruments or also just other.
Yeah. Also,
players.
rain on stage.
Yeah, absolutely.
Everyone's favorite. And it's another play that, you know, travels through time a little. It travels through time a lot, in fact, but speaks to a lot of the issues of today. And like, what do we remember? What stories can we tell?
Mm-hmm.
What stories are not okay for some communities to tell? What do we have to hide about ourselves? And it's a show I saw the Broadway pro shot, and I also saw it at Victory Gardens in Chicago. And both times, it just floored me. I think it's like the opening image is beautiful, the ending image is beautiful. I love Paula Vogel's work, and like I think it might be one of her best plays.
Oh, absolutely.
It's such a large show for a small company to sort of produce, and I think that has always been the sort of concern. I do miss these large shows, right? At a local level, and how you produce it, like, you know, I think that's the beauty of working at a university from time to time is being able to do large shows, because you do have the cast for it, you do have the resources to pull from across the university. But yeah, my fingers are crossed for you that you can pull that off. I'll be there backing you the whole way. So 5 years from now, what hopes do you have for like where you're headed? You know, like no strategic plans yet, but like where do you imagine yourself 5 years from now?
Yeah. I mean, if this goes well, if this works, but this is an experiment. That's part of it, is we wanted to get our hands dirty and try something. But like if we make it 5 years, I mean, I'd love to have a regular season. That would be really cool. As opposed to being more itinerant.
Yeah.
And like, here's a project we want to work on. Here's a venue we can put it in. Let's make it happen. But I'd love to start having a more longitudinal or like a more long-term conversation with Portland, not just on a show-by-show basis, but on a like, we're thinking about these things and we want to have conversations with all of you about them. And here's some plays that we think can do that. Is where I'd love to be. I feel like there's a number of companies in town that feel like I saw this in New York and I loved it and I wanted to bring it to Portland, which I think is fine. I think that's a fine ethos. But yeah, I'd really want to like sit down and have some conversations with Portland as a whole.
Yeah. And it's one of those things where, for me, in 5 years, what I would love is, again, that we have a season. It's not just where this is our first production. We want to see how if we can do this. Again, we are both like people with full-time jobs and other commitments. But we have hope that this will work, given like the goodwill of the community that we have and like the excitement that I think we both have heard about, like that the two of us are making theater together, because we've been friends for so long and we've wanted to make art together for so long. My hope is that, like Todd said, that we are having conversations about big topics, and topics that matter to more than just, white audience members is, for me, the thing that I'm thinking a lot about. As we work on Heart of Darkness, the more, I did a bunch of reading about the Congo, and the more I'm just like, yeah, we're living in a moment where I want to support folks who need it the most. And like, this is a play about mostly white ducks. And
absolutely.
And I want to make sure sort of our mission statement is like about the weirder and wilder and like the broadening of the canon of American theater as we see it. And like, I want us in 5 years, I want us to be continue to do that work.
Absolutely. Here. I'm all about shows that speak to a community and speak to our community in particular, even though it may have a national reach. And so I appreciate that. I applaud that. Go, everyone, please go see Heart of Darkness by H.A. Diddy. Running again, Todd, give me those dates.
August 20th to September 4th.
And where do we follow you? Where do we find you?
Yeah, so we are on Instagram and Blue Sky. On Instagram, we are at Fox Bramble, FOXBRAMBLE.
Great. Thank you. Any other last shout outs that you want to make?
I don't know if I have anything.
Thank you for having us. We're so excited to chat with you about this play and about absurdism and about dramaturgy, all things we like to chat about.
Yeah, well, thank you for coming on. This is Forge Theater Labs. Have a great evening, everyone.
This episode was hosted by Joshua N Hsu with post-production by Sam Rapaport.